They said Rowan Blackridge was carved from the same stone as his estate, cold, unyielding, and utterly merciless. But Eliza Whitmore didn't believe in rumors. Not until her wedding night, when her new husband looked at her like she was a contract to be filed away, then walked out without a word. Now, standing in the snow-covered courtyard months later, watching him ride past without even a glance, she finally understood. She hadn't married a man. She'd married a ghost who happened to breathe. And worse, she was starting to disappear too. Stay with us until the end to see how Eliza breaks free from this frozen prison. Hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from. The carriage lurched over another frozen rut, and Eliza pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window. Through the ice-clouded glass, she caught her first glimpse of Blackridge Hall. It squatted on the horizon like a predator at rest, all dark stone and narrow windows, surrounded by pine forests so dense they looked black against the winter sky. No smoke rose from the chimneys. No lights glowed in welcome. "Cheerful place," she muttered. Her maid, Ruth, clutched her rosary tighter. "Miss Eliza." "Mrs. Blackridge now," Eliza corrected, though the name tasted strange on her tongue. 3 days married, and she still felt like a fraud. "Mrs. Blackridge," Ruth whispered. "Are you certain about this?" Eliza wanted to laugh. Certain? She'd been certain about nothing since her father had announced the arrangement 6 weeks ago. Rowan Blackridge needs a wife. You need a future. It's settled. No courtship, no letters, just a name, a reputation, and a wedding date. The carriage jerked to a stop. Eliza didn't wait for the footman. She shoved the door open herself and stepped down into ankle-deep snow. The cold hit her like a slap, stealing her breath. Blackridge Hall loomed larger up close. The main building stretched 3 stories high, with 2 wings jutting out like arms trying to embrace nothing. The stone was darker than she'd expected, almost black where ice clung to the mortar. Dead ivy crawled up the eastern wall, skeletal and brown. "Someone should trim that," she said. No one answered. The front doors stood slightly ajar, revealing only darkness beyond. Eliza waited, expecting someone, anyone, to emerge. A housekeeper, a butler, her husband. Nothing. Ruth climbed down beside her, shivering. "Should we knock?" Before Eliza could answer, one door swung wider. A woman stepped out, tall, raw-boned, with iron-gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Her dress was black wool, severe and spotless. "Mrs. Blackridge." Not a greeting, a statement. "I'm Mrs. Greer, housekeeper." "A pleasure," Eliza lied. Mrs. Greer's gaze swept over her like she was livestock at auction. "Your rooms are prepared. Dinner is at 7. Lord Blackridge is currently inspecting the northern boundary and won't return until late." "How late?" "Late." The word hung in the frozen air like a door slamming shut. Mrs. Greer turned without another word and disappeared into the house. Ruth shot Eliza a desperate look, but Eliza just lifted her chin and followed. The entry hall was exactly as warm as the outside, which is to say, not at all. Their footsteps echoed on flagstone floors. Dark wood paneling absorbed what little light filtered through the high windows. A massive staircase curved upward into shadows. "The west wing is unused," Mrs. Greer announced as they climbed. "Lord Blackridge's chambers are in the east wing, 2nd floor. Your rooms adjoin his, though the connecting door remains locked unless you require something." Eliza stopped mid-step. "Locked?" "Lord Blackridge values his privacy." "We're married." "Yes." Mrs. Greer's expression didn't flicker. "Your rooms." She pushed open a door to reveal a bedroom that might have been lovely 50 years ago. The 4-poster bed was massive but cold-looking, draped in faded green velvet. The fireplace was clean-swept but empty. One narrow window overlooked a courtyard choked with dead weeds. "Dinner at 7, Mrs. Greer repeated, then left. Ruth immediately began unpacking, her hands shaking. Eliza crossed to the window and stared down at the desolate courtyard. "This is fine," she said aloud. "This is absolutely fine." It wasn't fine. Dinner was a farce. The dining room could have seated 40 people. Instead, it seated one, Eliza, at the very end of a table so long she could barely see the other end in the candlelight. The food was adequate. The silence was suffocating. Mrs. Greer appeared periodically like a specter, replacing dishes without comment. "Will Lord Blackridge be joining me?" Eliza asked during the third course. "No." "Tonight?" "No." "This week?" Mrs. Greer's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "Lord Blackridge takes his meals in his study when he's working." "And when he's not working?" "He's always working, ma'am." Eliza set down her fork carefully. "I'd like to see him." "He's not available." "I'm his wife." "Yes." Mrs. Greer collected the soup bowl. "You are." After dinner, Eliza retreated to her rooms and found Ruth already asleep in the servants' alcove, exhausted from travel. She couldn't blame her. The house seemed designed to drain energy, all that cold stone, all those empty rooms. She tried to read, couldn't focus, tried to sleep, couldn't settle. Finally, around midnight, she wrapped herself in a dressing gown and ventured into the hallway. If Rowan Blackridge wouldn't come to her, she'd go to him. The east wing was darker than the rest of the house. No lamps burned. No fires crackled behind closed doors. She moved quietly, counting doors until she found the one Mrs. Greer had indicated with a slight nod earlier. Light showed beneath it. Eliza raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. What was she supposed to say? "Hello, husband. I've never actually met. Just thought I'd introduce myself properly since you couldn't be bothered." Before she could decide, the door opened. Rowan Blackridge stood there, still fully dressed despite the hour, holding a ledger. He was taller than she'd realized during the brief wedding ceremony, easily 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the doorway. Dark hair, dark eyes, a face all harsh angles and no softness. He stared at her like she was a stranger who'd wandered into his house by mistake. "Yes?" His voice was low, rough-edged, not unkind exactly, just distant. Eliza's carefully prepared speech evaporated. "I'm Eliza." "I know." "Your wife." "I'm aware." "We haven't actually spoken since the wedding." "No." The silence stretched. Rowan didn't move, didn't invite her in, didn't ask why she was standing in his hallway in her nightclothes at midnight. "Is something wrong?" he asked finally. "Everything," she wanted to scream. "Everything is wrong. This house is wrong. This marriage is wrong. You're wrong." Instead, she said, "I wondered if we might have breakfast together tomorrow." "I eat at 5. "In the morning?" "Yes." "That's—" She swallowed. "I could manage 5. He regarded her for a long moment, and she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise? Doubt? But it was gone too quickly to name. "The small dining room, east wing." He started to close the door. "Rowan," he paused. "Why did you marry me?" The question hung between them like a blade. For a moment she thought he might actually answer. His jaw tightened. His hand gripped the door frame. Then, "Good night, Eliza." The door closed. The lock clicked. Eliza stood in the dark hallway, shaking, not from cold, but from rage. She made it to breakfast at 5. The small dining room was still bigger than necessary, but at least she could see the other end of the table. Rowan sat there, already working through paperwork, a plate of untouched food beside him. He glanced up when she entered. "You came." "I said I would." "Most people don't mean what they say." "I'm not most people." Something that might have been amusement crossed his face, but he returned to his papers without responding. Eliza served herself from the sideboard, eggs, bread, weak tea, and sat down. They ate in silence. After 10 minutes, she couldn't stand it anymore. "What are you working on?" "Estate business." "What kind?" "The kind that keeps people from starving." She set down her tea carefully. "I wasn't trying to be dismissive." "I know." He signed something without looking up. "But I have 40 families depending on these decisions, and only so many hours in the day." "Then why have breakfast at all?" "Why did you want to?" It was a fair question. Eliza studied him, the set of his shoulders, the dark circles under his eyes, the way his hand moved across the page with mechanical efficiency. He looked like a man who'd forgotten how to be anything except useful. "Because," she said slowly, "I'm here. You're here. And pretending otherwise seems exhausting." His pen stopped moving. For the first time since she'd arrived, Rowan Blackridge actually looked at her. Really looked. Not like she was an obligation or a stranger, but like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "You should know something," he said quietly. "I'm not going to be what you want." "What do I want?" "A husband who makes you happy, who talks about feelings and plans romantic gestures, who—" He gestured vaguely. "Whatever it is women expect from marriage." "That's a lot of assumptions. Am I wrong?" Eliza considered lying, considered the polite deflection, the diplomatic response. Instead, she met his eyes and said, "I don't know what I want yet. I only know what I don't want." "Which is?" "To be invisible." Something shifted in his expression. Pain, maybe, or recognition. He looked away first. "I can't promise you won't be disappointed," he said. "I'm already disappointed, but I'm still here." He nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he'd suspected. Then he returned to his paperwork, and the moment, whatever it had been, passed. But Eliza noticed he didn't ask her to leave. She finished her breakfast in silence, then stood. "Same time tomorrow?" "If you want." "I do." She left before he could see how much that small concession cost her. Days bled into weeks. The routine became familiar. 5 a.m. breakfast in the small dining room, Rowan buried in work, Eliza trying to coax conversation from stone. Sometimes she succeeded. Mostly, she didn't. But she learned things. She learned that Blackridge Hall managed over 3,000 acres of frontier land, farms, timber, a small mining operation. She learned that Rowan personally reviewed every expense, every complaint, every request. She learned that he rode the boundaries twice weekly, checking on tenants who barely acknowledged him. She learned that he was desperately, crushingly lonely, even if he'd never admit it. "Why don't you hire a steward?" she asked one morning, watching him work through another stack of ledgers. "I had one. He stole from the tenants. So hire a better one. And if he steals too—" Rowan didn't look up. "These people already think I'm a tyrant. I won't give them reason to be right." "You're not a tyrant." "You don't know that. I'm living in your house, eating your food. You haven't once—" She stopped, reconsidering. He looked up then, eyes sharp. "Haven't what?" "Demanded anything from me." The words settled between them like snow, soft at first, then heavier. Rowan's expression went carefully blank. "I told you," he said, "I'm not going to be what you want." "Stop saying that." "It's true." "It's cowardice." His jaw clenched. For a moment she thought he might actually lose his temper, might show her something real beneath all that ice. Instead, he stood abruptly. "I have work to do." "You always have work to do." "Yes." He left his breakfast half-eaten and walked out. Eliza sat alone at the table, surrounded by his abandoned paperwork, and wondered how long a person could survive on scraps of almost conversations and 5 a.m. breakfasts. Not forever, she suspected, but maybe long enough to matter. The first thaw came in late March. Eliza woke to the sound of dripping, ice melting off the eaves, snow sliding from the roof. She dressed quickly and went to the window. The courtyard was a mess of mud and dead weeds, but beneath the decay she could see bones of something better. Garden beds, stone pathways, a dry fountain in the center. "Mrs. Greer," she called, heading downstairs. "Mrs. Greer!" The housekeeper materialized from the shadows, like always. "Yes?" "The courtyard. Was it a garden once?" "Long ago." "Who maintained it?" "The previous Lady Blackridge." Eliza waited, but Mrs. Greer offered nothing else. "And after she died?" "No one." "Why not?" Mrs. Greer's expression could have frozen the newly melted snow. "Lord Blackridge doesn't believe in wasting resources on decoration." "A garden isn't decoration. It's—" Eliza stopped, realizing she was arguing with the wrong person. "I want to restore it." "That's not your decision to make." "I'm Lady Blackridge now. It's exactly my decision." They stared at each other. Mrs. Greer broke first, barely. "You'll need to ask Lord Blackridge." "Then I'll ask." She found him in his study, surrounded by maps. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face. "Eliza." I want to restore the courtyard garden. No preamble, no softening. If he was going to say no, she wanted it over with quickly. Rowan set down his pen. Why? Because it's dead and I can fix it. That's not a reason. It's the only reason I have. She stepped closer. I've been here 2 months, Rowan. I eat alone, sleep alone, spend my days wandering empty rooms. Let me do this. It's a waste of resources. It's dirt and seeds. How expensive can it be? Not the money. He rubbed his face tiredly. The time. The effort. What if you fail? Then I fail. But at least I'll have tried something. He studied her for a long moment, and she could see him calculating, weighing her request against some internal ledger she didn't understand. Finally, fine. Fine? Fix the garden, but don't expect help. Everyone here has real work to do. It should have stung. It did sting, but Eliza just nodded. I don't need help. We'll see. She left before he could change his mind. Turned out she didn't need help. The courtyard was worse than she'd thought. Years of neglect had turned the soil to clay, the beds to rubble. She spent the first week just clearing debris, her hands blistering despite gloves. Ruth helped when she could, but the other servants avoided the courtyard like it was cursed. Mrs. Greer watched from windows with obvious disapproval. And Rowan said nothing. But Eliza noticed small things, tools appearing on the garden wall, a delivery of compost she hadn't ordered, the way he paused sometimes when crossing the courtyard, like he wanted to ask about her progress but couldn't quite manage it. One afternoon, she was wrestling with a particularly stubborn root when she heard footsteps. You're doing it wrong. She looked up, shading her eyes against the sun. A man stood there, weathered face, strong hands, worn work clothes, one of the tenant farmers, she guessed. Probably, she agreed, but I'm doing it anyway. He grunted, then crouched beside her. This root, you're pulling against the grain. Go with it, like this. He showed her, and the root came free with surprising ease. Thank you, Mr. Hewitt, James Hewitt. He stood, brushing dirt off his hands. Used to help the old lady Blackridge with her gardens. Did you know her well? Well enough. His expression softened. She was kind. Made this place feel less hard. What happened to her? Fever 10 years ago. He glanced toward the house. Lord Blackridge closed up the gardens the day after she died. Said they were a reminder of failure. Eliza's throat tightened. His mother? He was 18 when she passed. Changed him. Hewitt picked up a shovel. But if you're serious about fixing this place, I'll help. Can't promise much time, but I'll do what I can. Why? He smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen since arriving at Blackridge Hall. Because some things deserve to grow back, even after they've died. Word spread. Within a week, 3 more tenants had joined the restoration effort. An older woman who remembered the original plannings, a young man with a talent for stonework, a girl barely 16 who turned out to have a gift with herbs. They worked in the early mornings and late evenings, fitting garden work around their other duties. They didn't talk much, but they were steady, reliable, and they treated Eliza like she belonged. Mrs. Greer's disapproval intensified. You're disrupting their schedules, she complained. They're volunteering. They're afraid to say no to you. Then ask them yourself. Mrs. Greer didn't. Rowan's reaction was harder to read. He still took his meals alone, still kept to his schedule, still maintained that careful distance. But sometimes Eliza would catch him watching from his study window, or find a new tool exactly where she needed it. He never mentioned the garden directly, not until the day she found him standing in the courtyard at dawn, staring at the newly cleared beds. It's starting to look different, he said without turning around. Eliza set down her watering can. That was the idea. My mother planted roses here. He pointed to the eastern bed. Yellow ones. They smelled like honey. I could plant roses again. Don't. The word was sharp enough to cut. Eliza waited. If you plant roses and they die, he continued quietly, it'll be worse than leaving it empty. They won't die. You don't know that. No, she agreed. But I'm going to try anyway. He finally turned to look at her. In the pale morning light, he looked younger, closer to his actual age, which she'd learned was only 28. Still young, still capable of change, if he wanted to be. "Why?" he asked. "Why does this matter so much to you?" "Because," Eliza said carefully, "if I can make dead things grow here, maybe I can survive here too." The honesty seemed to catch him off guard. His expression flickered through several emotions too quickly to name, landing finally on something that looked almost like regret. "Eliza, don't." She picked up her watering can again. "Don't apologize or explain or tell me again what you can't be. Just let me have this." He nodded slowly. Then, surprising her completely, he knelt and began clearing rocks from the nearest bed. They worked in silence until the sun was fully up and his responsibilities called him away. But for half an hour, they'd worked together. It wasn't much. It was something. By May, the courtyard was transformed. The beds were full of early shoots, vegetables, herbs, a few hardy flowers. The fountain still didn't work, but the stonework was repaired and cleaned. The pathways were cleared and relaid. It wasn't beautiful yet, but it was alive. The change spread beyond the courtyard. Tenants who'd been wary started stopping by the main house with questions or requests. Eliza found herself acting as informal liaison, passing messages to Rowan, explaining his decisions, sometimes advocating for compromises. He let her. It should have brought them closer. In some ways it did. Their breakfast conversations grew longer, less stilted. He asked her opinion occasionally. She learned to read his moods, but the fundamental distance remained. Separate rooms, separate lives, a marriage in name only. And Eliza was starting to realize that all the gardens in the world wouldn't change that. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. She'd spent the day helping one of the tenant families prepare for a new baby, organizing supplies, cleaning, offering what comfort she could. When she returned to Blackridge Hall, exhausted and dirty, she found Rowan in the courtyard. He wasn't alone. A man stood with him, tall, well-dressed, with an easy smile that seemed foreign in this harsh place. They were talking intently, reviewing what looked like contracts. "Eliza," Rowan noticed her first. "This is Marcus Webb. He's considering investing in the mining operation." Webb turned and his smile widened. "Lady Blackridge, what a pleasure." He took her hand, actually took it, something Rowan hadn't done since their wedding day, and the touch sent a jolt through her. Not attraction exactly, just contact, warmth, human connection. "Mr. Webb," she managed. "Marcus, please. I've heard remarkable things about what you've done here." He gestured to the garden. "Rowan tells me this was your project?" "It was nothing." "It's hardly nothing. You've brought life to a place that desperately needed it." He was charming, attentive, everything Rowan wasn't, and Eliza hated how much she noticed. "If you'll excuse me," she said quietly, "I need to clean up." She fled before either man could respond. That night, lying awake in her cold bed, Eliza finally let herself acknowledge the truth she'd been avoiding for weeks. She was lonely, desperately, achingly lonely, and her husband either didn't notice or didn't care. Somewhere down the hall, Rowan's door opened and closed. She heard his footsteps pass her room without pausing. She wondered if he was lonely too. She wondered if it would matter if he was. The garden was growing. Their marriage was not. And Eliza was starting to suspect that some things couldn't be fixed with patience and seeds and stubborn determination. Some things stayed broken, no matter how hard you tried. She just didn't know yet how long she could keep trying before she broke too. Marcus Webb stayed for 3 days. 3 days of watching him charm everyone he met, tenants, servants, even Mrs. Greer thawed slightly in his presence. He had stories about London, about trade routes and investments, about a world beyond these frozen boundaries that Eliza had almost forgotten existed. And he paid attention to her, not in any improper way, just noticed. When she spoke, he listened. When she worked in the garden, he asked questions that weren't just polite. When she mentioned missing music, he hummed a waltz while helping her stake tomato plants. "You should visit the city," he said on his last afternoon, kneeling beside her in the dirt. "There's a new concert hall. The acoustics are supposed to be extraordinary." "I don't think Rowan would—" "Come with me then. I'm heading back next week. You could stay with my sister. Perfectly respectable. Eliza's hand stilled on the seedling she was transplanting. That's not appropriate. Why not? You're married, not imprisoned. Wasn't she, though? She glanced toward the house. Rowan stood at his study window, watching them. Even from this distance, she could feel the weight of his gaze. I can't, she said quietly. Marcus followed her line of sight and sighed. He's a fool. He's my husband. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. He stood, brushing dirt from his knees. The offer stands, Eliza, if you ever change your mind. That evening, after Marcus had departed in his fine carriage, Eliza found Rowan in the stables. He was checking a horse's leg, his shirt sleeves rolled up despite the chill. You didn't come to dinner, she said. I ate earlier. You always eat earlier. He didn't respond, just continued running his hands over the horse's cannon bone with practiced efficiency. Eliza stepped closer. Marcus invited me to London. Rowan's hand stopped moving. And? And I said no. Why are you telling me this? I don't know. She laughed, the sound bitter even to her own ears. Maybe I wanted you to care? I do care. Then show it. The words burst out before she could stop them. Do something. Say something. Anything except this nothing. He straightened slowly, his expression unreadable in the dim lantern light. What do you want from me, Eliza? I want you to want me here. I do. You have a strange way of showing it. Because I don't know how. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as her. He turned away, gripping the stall door. I don't know how to be what you need. I don't know how to... He stopped, his knuckles white against the wood. Eliza waited, barely breathing. This was the closest he'd ever come to real honesty. My father, Rowan said finally, his voice low and rough, was a brutal man. He saw affection as weakness. When my mother died, he told me grief was self-indulgence. When I was 15 and tried to help a tenant family, he beat me for wasting resources on sentiment. Rowan, I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because you need to understand. I learned early that caring leads to pain, that attachment is dangerous, that the only safe way to live is to keep everyone at a distance. That's not living. That's just existing. It's survival. It's cowardice. His jaw clenched. Maybe, but it's kept me functional for 10 years. It's kept this estate running. It's kept those 40 families fed and housed. If that makes me a coward, fine. But at least I'm a useful one. The horse shifted nervously between them. Eliza fought the urge to reach for him, knowing he'd only pull away. What happened to your father? She asked instead. Fell from his horse during a storm, broke his neck. I was 20. Rowan's voice was flat, emotionless. I inherited everything, the estate, the debts, the reputation. And I swore I would do better, be better, never become him. You're nothing like him. How would you know? You barely know me. Whose fault is that? The question landed like a stone in still water. Rowan flinched, and for a moment she thought he might finally break, might let her in. Instead, he walked past her toward the stable door. I have work to finish. It's nearly midnight. Then I'll work until midnight. He left her standing alone in the stables, surrounded by the warm smell of hay and horses, feeling colder than she'd ever felt in her entire life. Summer came hard and fast to the frontier. The snow melted into mud, the mud dried to dust. The garden exploded into chaotic growth, vegetables sprawling beyond their beds, herbs gone wild, flowers blooming in defiant splashes of color against the stark stone walls. Eliza threw herself into the work. If she couldn't fix her marriage, she could at least fix this. The tenants came more frequently now, not just to help with the garden, but with problems, disputes over property lines, concerns about crop yields. A young mother worried about her daughter's cough. Eliza listened, helped where she could, brought the bigger issues to Rowan during their increasingly silent breakfasts. He solved them efficiently, without emotion, then returned to his ledgers. She wanted to scream. Instead, she planted more seeds and pretended it was enough. One afternoon in late June, James Hewitt appeared at the garden gate looking troubled. Lady Blackridge. A word? She set down her pruning shears. What's wrong? There's talk. Down in the valley. He glanced toward the house. About Lord Blackridge and the mining operation. What kind of talk? That he's cutting corners, that the safety measures aren't adequate, that he cares more about profit than people. Eliza's stomach dropped. That's not true. I know that, you know that, but Marcus Webb's been back twice since his first visit, always asking questions, always stirring things up. And people listen to a man with city manners and a silver tongue. What's he saying? That Lord Blackridge is sitting on a fortune while his tenants barely scrape by, that the mine could produce twice as much with the right investment, Webb's investment, that perhaps new management would serve everyone better. He's trying to buy the mine, trying to buy everything from what I hear. The mine, the timber rights, maybe even the estate itself if he can convince enough people that Lord Blackridge is unfit. Eliza felt something cold settle in her chest. And people believe him? Hewitt's silence was answer enough. She found Rowan in his study, buried in the same damn paperwork that consumed every waking hour. We need to talk, she said without preamble. He looked up, taking in her expression. What happened? Marcus Webb is trying to undermine you. To her surprise, Rowan just nodded. I know. You know? He made an offer last week, very generous. Take on a partner, him, or sell outright. Rowan set down his pen. I refused. Why didn't you tell me? Why would I? The casual dismissal stung worse than any argument. Because I'm your wife, because these are our tenants, because... She stopped, forcing herself to breathe. What are you going to do? Nothing. Nothing? The mine is profitable. The safety measures are adequate. Webb can spread whatever rumors he wants. The truth will hold. Truth doesn't matter if no one believes it. Then they're fools. Eliza stared at him. You really don't understand people at all, do you? I understand numbers, contracts, facts. He gestured to the ledgers covering his desk. Everything else is just noise. People aren't noise, Rowan. They're scared. They're uncertain. And when someone like Marcus comes along offering easy answers and charming smiles, they want to believe him. So what would you have me do? Make speeches? Charm them? Yes, talk to them. Show them you care. I keep them fed, housed, employed. That's caring. That's management. She leaned against the desk, forcing him to look at her. When was the last time you actually spoke to one of your tenants? Not about business, just spoke. His expression went carefully blank. I don't have time for social calls. Then make time. Eliza, or let me help. I could... No. The word was sharp enough to cut. Rowan stood abruptly, putting the desk between them. You've done enough already. What's that supposed to mean? The garden, the visiting, plain lady of the manor. His voice was controlled, but something dangerous flickered beneath. You've made yourself indispensable to them. But when Webb makes his move, when things get difficult, what then? Will you stay, or will you leave like everyone else? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Is that what you think? Eliza's voice shook. That I'm here on some kind of trial basis? I think you're young. I think you had no choice in this marriage. And I think the first time someone offers you something better, you'll take it. Marcus offered me London. I said no. This time. The words hit like a slap. Eliza stepped back, her hands clenched into fists. You're right, she said quietly. I didn't choose this marriage, and you've made damn sure I regret it every single day. But I'm still here, Rowan. I'm still trying, which is more than you can say. She left before he could respond, her vision blurring with angry tears. She shouldn't have gone to the village alone, but she was furious and hurt and needed to do something, so she saddled a horse, one of the gentle mares the stable master had shown her, and rode down the valley to where most of the tenant families clustered. The reception was cooler than usual. Women who normally greeted her warmly now offered tight smiles. Men who'd helped with the garden found reasons to be elsewhere. Even the children seemed wary. Only old Meg, the herb woman who'd been teaching Eliza about medicinal plants, spoke plainly. You shouldn't have come, girl. Why not? Because Webb's been here, asking questions, suggesting things. Meg glanced around, then lowered her voice. He's got people thinking Lord Blackridge is bleeding them dry while hoarding wealth. And you, well, they're not sure about you anymore. What did I do? Nothing. That's the problem. You're his wife, but you live like a stranger in that house. You work the garden while he hides in his study. People are starting to wonder whose side you're really on. There are no sides. We're all just trying to survive. Maybe. Meg's weathered face creased with something like sympathy. But survival sometimes means choosing the lesser evil. And Webb's offering certainty. Your husband's offering more of the same hard living with no end in sight. Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to defend Rowan, defend the progress they'd made, defend the careful balance keeping everything from collapse. But standing in the dusty village square, surrounded by exhausted people who'd worked themselves to the bone for generations, she couldn't find the words. Because maybe they were right to be angry. Maybe Rowan was squeezing too hard, demanding too much. Maybe she'd been so focused on her own loneliness that she'd missed seeing theirs. The ride back to Blackridge Hall felt twice as long. The sun beat down mercilessly, and by the time she reached the stables, she was dizzy with heat and doubt. Marcus Webb was there. Of course he was. He dismounted from a bay stallion that probably cost more than most of the tenant families earned in a year, all easy grace and perfect teeth. Eliza, what a pleasant surprise. What are you doing here? Business with your husband. He's being remarkably stubborn about a very reasonable partnership proposal. Webb studied her face. Are you all right? You look flushed. I'm fine. You're clearly not. Come, sit in the shade. I'll get you water. He was already guiding her toward the garden before she could protest. The familiar space felt different with him in it, smaller, somehow. Less hers. Beautiful work, he said, gesturing to the thriving beds. You've accomplished more in 4 months than I would have thought possible. The soil was better than it looked. It wasn't the soil. It was you. He handed her a ladle of cool water from the well. You have a gift for bringing life to dead places. The compliment should have felt good. Instead, it felt dangerous. Marcus, I know. You're married, committed, loyal. He sat on the fountain's edge, his expression growing serious. But I also know you're unhappy. Anyone with eyes can see it. That's not your concern, isn't it? We're friends, aren't we? Were they? Eliza wasn't sure anymore. The line between friendship and something else had started blurring weeks ago, and she was too tired to figure out where one ended and the other began. Rowan thinks you're trying to take over the estate, she said instead. Rowan thinks everyone is trying to take something from him. It's exhausting. Webb's voice softened. I'm trying to help. The mine could be so much more with proper investment. The tenants could have better lives. Even you. Even me what? Could be happy. Truly happy, not just making the best of a bad situation. I'm not unhappy. You're a terrible liar. She should have been offended. Should have defended herself, her marriage, her choices. Instead, she just felt tired. What do you want, Marcus? Right now, for you to admit that this, he gestured around them, isn't enough. That you deserve more than cold breakfast and a husband who treats you like a business arrangement. He's trying. Is he? Because from where I stand, he's doing exactly what he's always done, hiding behind work and calling it duty. Marcus leaned forward. You're wasting yourself here, Eliza. Wasting your kindness on people too ground down to appreciate it. Wasting your loyalty on a man too broken to return it. You don't know him. I know his type. Men who mistake isolation for strength, who confuse emotional constipation with nobility. His hand moved like he might touch hers, then retreated. You could leave. Start over. Be someone other than Lady Blackridge, tragic frontier wife. I made vows. So did he. Is he keeping them? The question hit harder than it should have, because what were the vows exactly? Love, honor, cherish? Rowan had never promised those, barely even pretended. Their marriage was a contract, nothing more, and Eliza was starting to suspect that no amount of gardens or persistence or stubborn hope would ever change that. "I need to go," she said, standing abruptly. "Think about London," Marcus called after her. "The offer still stands." She didn't answer. She didn't tell Rowan about the conversation, partly because she knew he'd just say something coldly rational about Marcus being predictable, partly because she didn't trust herself not to throw his own failures back in his face, mostly because she was starting to wonder if Marcus was right. The heat wave continued. Temperatures climbed into the 90s, brutal and relentless. The garden required constant watering, the tenants grew more irritable, and Rowan buried himself even deeper in work, as if sheer force of will could solve problems that needed human connection. Their breakfasts became shorter, more strained. Until the morning, he didn't show up at all. Eliza waited until 5:30, then went looking. His study was empty. His bedroom, too. She finally found him in the stables, helping the stable master with a mare in distress. "She's been laboring too long," the stable master said grimly. "Foal's breech." Rowan had his sleeves rolled up, sweat pouring down his face. "Can you turn it?" "Trying, but—" The mare screamed, a sound that raised every hair on Eliza's arms. Rowan's hands moved with surprising gentleness, trying to guide the foal into position. "Come on," he murmured. "Come on, girl. Work with me." It took another hour. By the time the foal finally slipped free, small and wet and miraculously breathing, Rowan looked ready to collapse. "Is she all right?" Eliza asked. "She will be." He slumped against the stall door, exhausted. "And the foal." They stood in silence, watching the mare nose her newborn. It was the first peaceful moment they'd shared in weeks. "You're good at that," Eliza said quietly. "At what?" "Caring when you let yourself." Rowan's expression shuddered immediately. "It's just practical. Losing a mare and foal would be expensive." "It's not just practical. You were scared." "I was concerned about the investment." "You were scared," she insisted. "I saw your face. You cared about that horse the same way you care about the tenants, the same way you—" She stopped. He looked at her then, really looked, and something passed between them, fragile and tentative and almost real. "I should clean up," he said, breaking the moment. "I have meetings. It's barely 6 in the morning. Work doesn't wait." He left her standing in the stables, surrounded by hay and blood and the smell of new life, wondering how much longer she could keep breaking her heart against his walls. The crisis came in mid-July. One of the mine supports failed. No one died, but 3 men were injured, one badly. The news spread through the valley like wildfire, and by nightfall an angry crowd had gathered at Blackridge Hall's gates. Rowan went to meet them alone. Eliza watched from the garden as he stood before 40 furious people and took every accusation, every insult, every bit of rage without flinching. "You promised it was safe. You said the supports were solid. My brother might lose his leg because you cut corners." Rowan's voice carried across the courtyard, calm and cold. "I will pay for all medical treatment. The injured men will receive full wages during recovery. The mine will remain closed until every support has been inspected and reinforced." "With whose money?" someone shouted. "Yours or Webb's?" "Mine." "You don't have enough." "Then I'll borrow it." "While we starve waiting?" Marcus Webb materialized from the crowd like a conjurer's trick. "Perhaps I can help clarify the situation." Rowan's jaw tightened. "This doesn't concern you." "Doesn't it? These good people are my friends. Their safety concerns me." Webb addressed the crowd. "Lord Blackridge is offering bandages when what you need is surgery. Close the mine for inspections? How will you eat while it's closed? Borrow money at what interest rate? From what bank that won't own this estate when he defaults?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "I can offer a better solution," Webb continued. "Let me invest. Properly. Enough capital to fix the mine right. Enough surplus to pay wages during repairs. Enough security that one accident doesn't bankrupt everyone." "In exchange for what?" Rowan's voice was dangerously quiet. "Partnership, 50-50. Shared decisions, shared profits, shared responsibility. Shared control." "Is that so terrible? You clearly can't manage alone." The crowd was nodding now. Eliza could see it happening, the slow slide from anger to acceptance. They wanted to believe Webb, wanted the easy answer, and Rowan was giving them nothing to believe in except more of the same grinding hardship. She moved before thinking, stepping out of the shadows and into the torchlight. Wait! Every head turned. Rowan looked at her like she'd appeared from nowhere, his expression unreadable. Lady Blackridge, Webb said smoothly, perhaps you can talk sense into your husband. I'm not here to talk sense. I'm here because you're all making decisions based on fear instead of facts. She raised her voice. How many of you have actually seen the mine's financial records? Silence. How many know how much profit it generates versus how much goes back into wages, maintenance, safety measures? More silence. You're angry because men got hurt. You should be angry, but you're blaming the wrong person. Eliza looked at Rowan. He's not perfect. He's distant and closed off and terrible at showing that he cares. But he does care. I've seen the ledgers. Every penny from that mine goes back into this estate. His personal quarters have the same threadbare furniture from his father's time. He hasn't bought new clothes in years. He eats plain food and works 18-hour days and pushes himself until he's half dead from exhaustion, all to keep this place running. That doesn't fix broken mine supports, someone muttered. No, it doesn't. But neither does letting a stranger take over. She turned to Webb. You talk about investment and partnership, but what happens when the easy money dries up? When your London interests call you back? We'll still be here, still surviving, still dependent on land that won't forgive mistakes. I would never abandon. You already have. 3 visits in 4 months, each one about money and leverage and control. You don't know these people. You don't know this land. You just know opportunity when you see it. Webb's charming smile finally slipped. Careful, Eliza. Or what? You'll stop pretending to be my friend? The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Rowan stood frozen, staring at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Eliza took a breath. I'm not saying Lord Blackridge is blameless. The mine failed. People got hurt. That's on him. But selling our future to fix our present is just trading one kind of dependence for another. At least now we own our mistakes. Pretty speech, Webb said coldly, but speeches don't pay medical bills. No. Work does. She looked at the crowd. Give him 3 months. Let him fix the mine properly. If he can't, if we're still struggling come harvest, then consider other options. But don't make permanent decisions based on temporary fear. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then James Hewitt stepped forward. 3 months. But we want weekly reports. On repairs, on finances, on everything. Agreed, Rowan said quietly. And if you fail, then I'll step aside. The crowd dispersed slowly, muttering but no longer violent. Webb left without another word, his expression promising that this wasn't over. When everyone was gone, Rowan turned to Eliza. You didn't have to do that. I know. You defended me. I defended us, this estate, these people. She met his eyes. But mostly I defended the truth, even if it makes me a fool for believing in you. Something cracked in his expression, pain or gratitude or possibly both. He opened his mouth like he might actually say something real, then closed it again. I have work to do, he said finally. Of course you do. He walked back to the house, shoulders rigid with all the things he wouldn't say. Eliza stood alone in the empty courtyard, surrounded by her garden and her choices, and wondered if she'd just saved something worth saving, or if she had just bought 3 more months of beautiful, agonizing loneliness in a stone fortress that would never feel like home. The night pressed close around her. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, a storm coming. Eliza hoped it would break the heat. She feared it would only make everything worse. The storm broke just after midnight. Eliza lay awake listening to rain hammer the roof like fists demanding entry. Lightning turned her room white bright, then plunged it back into darkness. Thunder shook the stone walls. She thought about getting up, checking the garden, making sure the newly staked plants wouldn't be torn apart by wind. Instead, she stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Rowan was awake too, wondering if he ever thought about her at all. The next morning dawned gray and cold. Summer heat broken by the violence of the storm. Eliza dressed quickly and went to assess the damage. The garden had survived, barely. Half the tomato stakes were down, and the herb bed looked like it had been trampled, but nothing was beyond saving. She was restaking a pepper plant when Ruth found her. "Ma'am, you need to come inside." Something in her voice made Eliza drop the stake. What happened? It's Lord Blackridge. You should just come. She found him in his study, surrounded by what looked like every ledger and contract from the past decade. Papers covered the desk, the chairs, most of the floor. He stood in the middle of it all, his hair disheveled, his shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it, if he'd slept at all. Rowan? He looked up and her breath caught. His eyes were bloodshot, his face haggard. He looked like a man who'd aged 10 years overnight. I can't do it, he said. Can't do what? Fix the mine, pay the wages, keep my promise. He gestured helplessly at the papers. I've been going over the numbers all night. Even if I borrow against next year's timber harvest, even if I cut my own expenses to nothing, it's not enough. Not to do it right. Eliza stepped carefully over a pile of contracts. How short are you? 12,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 12,000 was more than most frontier estates generated in 5 years. Webb would give you that, she said quietly, for half of everything I've built. Is that so terrible? If it means keeping people safe? His laugh was bitter. You think that's all he wants? Control of the mine? He'll start there, sure, but then it'll be the timber rights, then the farmland, then... He stopped, his jaw clenched. Men like Marcus Webb don't do partnerships. They do acquisitions. You don't know that. I know his type. I've seen it before. My father... He cut himself off, shaking his head. It doesn't matter. The point is I gave them 3 months and I can't deliver. So tell them. Tell them what? That I failed? That they were right to doubt me? He slumped into his chair. They'll tear me apart, and they should. I promised safety and gave them broken bones. I promised stability and gave them debt. Eliza knelt beside his chair, forcing him to look at her. Then we find another way. There is no other way. There's always another way. We just haven't thought of it yet. He studied her face like she was speaking a foreign language. Why are you helping me? After everything, after the way I've treated you, why? Because I'm a fool, she wanted to say. Because I keep hoping you'll let me in. Because somewhere beneath all that ice, I still believe there's something worth saving. Instead, she said, because it's the right thing to do. Something shifted in his expression, pain mixed with something that looked almost like hope. He reached up, his hand hovering near her cheek, then dropped it. Eliza. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Mrs. Greer appeared, her face grim. Sir, there are men here to see you, from the valley. Rowan stood immediately, his mask sliding back into place. How many? All of them. They gathered in the main hall, not angry like before, but determined. James Hewitt stood at the front, looking older than his years. We've been talking, he said without preamble, about the mine, about Webb's offer. Rowan's face went carefully blank. And? And we think you should take it. The words landed like stones. Eliza saw Rowan flinch, just barely. I see. It's not that we don't trust you, Hewitt continued. It's that we can't afford to wait. Winter's coming. Families need wages now, not promises of future repairs. I understand. Do you? An older woman stepped forward, Sarah Marsh, whose son had been injured in the collapse. My boy might never walk right again. You say you'll pay for doctors, but city doctors cost more than you have. Webb's offering real money, real security. Webb's offering control, Rowan said quietly. Once he owns half the mine, he owns all of you too. At least we'd be owned by someone who shows up. The accusation hit harder than any shout. Rowan went very still. That's not fair, Eliza said, stepping forward. He's here every day, working himself half to death. Working on papers, Sarah interrupted. Sitting in that study while we're breaking our backs in his fields. When's the last time he came down to the valley? Talk to us like we're people, not problems to solve? I keep you employed, Rowan said, his voice strained. Fed, housed. You keep us useful. That's not the same thing. The crowd murmured agreement. Eliza could see it happening again, the slow slide toward Webb's easy promises. But this time, her speech wouldn't work. This time, they'd made up their minds. There's something else, Hewitt said, his discomfort obvious. Webb's made an additional offer. If you won't sell the mine, he'll buy out individual leases. Any tenant who wants to sell their land rights to him directly can do so. He'll pay fair market value plus 20%. Rowan's face went white. He can't do that. Actually, he can. The leases are transferable. It's in the original contracts. My father's contracts. Still legal. For a moment, Eliza thought Rowan might actually break. His hands clenched into fists, his breathing shallow. Then somehow he pulled himself together. How many of you are considering this? He asked. Nearly every hand went up. I see. Rowan's voice was utterly flat. Then I won't stand in your way. Do what you think is best. He turned and walked out. Eliza stared after him, torn between following and staying to argue. In the end, she did neither, just stood there uselessly while the crowd dispersed, already discussing Webb's offer like Rowan had never existed. She found him an hour later in the stables, saddling his horse with jerky, angry movements. Where are you going? North boundary. There's a fence that needs checking. Rowan, don't. He yanked the girth tight. Don't tell me it'll be fine. Don't tell me there's another way. Just don't. I was going to say you're not alone in this. He laughed, the sound sharp and broken. Aren't I? They've made their choice. Webb wins, I lose. It's simple. Nothing about this is simple. You're wrong. It's the simplest thing in the world. He swung into the saddle. I tried to be better than my father, tried to care without controlling, and it wasn't enough. It's never enough. That's not true. Then why are they leaving? The question came out raw, all his control finally cracking. I gave them everything I had, every penny, every hour, every piece of myself I could afford to give, and they're still choosing a stranger over me. They're scared. So am I. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as her. He gathered the reins. I'm terrified, Eliza, of failing, of becoming my father, of being exactly as broken as everyone believes I am. You're not broken. Yes, I am. He looked down at her, and his eyes were full of something that might have been grief. And I'm sorry for dragging you into this, for not being. He stopped, shaking his head. You should leave. Go to London with Marcus. Start over somewhere that doesn't smell like failure. I'm not leaving. You should. He rode off before she could respond, disappearing into the gray morning like a ghost. Eliza stood in the empty stable yard, rage and heartbreak warring in her chest. She wanted to scream, wanted to chase after him and shake him until he understood that running away solved nothing. Instead, she went back to the house and started planning. If Rowan wouldn't fight for this place, she would. The first thing she did was visit every tenant family in the valley, not to argue, not to persuade, just to listen. She sat in cramped kitchens and listened to mothers worry about winter provisions. She stood in fields and listened to farmers explain why Webb's prices were too good to refuse. She held crying children and listened to their parents describe the grinding exhaustion of frontier life. And slowly, a pattern emerged. They weren't leaving because they hated Rowan. They were leaving because they'd lost hope, lost the belief that things could ever get better. Webb was selling them a dream. Rowan was offering more of the same nightmare. No wonder they were choosing the dream. On the third day of her circuit, she found herself at Sarah Marsh's cottage. The injured son, Thomas, lay on a cot by the fire, his leg wrapped in bandages. How is he? Eliza asked. Alive. That's something. Sarah poured weak tea. The doctor says he might walk again. With the right treatment. In the city. How much does that cost? More than I'll ever have. Sarah's voice was flat with exhausted acceptance. So he'll make do with what we've got. Most likely end up with a limp and limited work options. But at least he's alive. Eliza thought about the ledgers in Rowan's study, the careful accounting of every penny, the way he'd calculated expenses down to the last farthing, and she thought about the threadbare furniture in his rooms, the worn clothes, the years of self-denial. What if there was money for treatment? She asked slowly. There isn't. But if there was? Sarah looked at her with something like pity. Lady Blackridge, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but promises don't pay doctors. Webb's offering real money now. That's what matters. What if Rowan matched it? He can't. He said as much. Well, what if he could, though? What if there was a way to fund the mine repairs and medical treatment without selling to Webb. Then I'd call it a miracle. But miracles don't happen on the frontier. Only hard choices and harder consequences. Eliza left feeling more determined than ever. She spent that night going through the estate records, not just the current ones, but going back years, decades, looking for anything Rowan might have missed in his exhaustion. She found it at 3 a.m, a land deed, tucked in with her father's old papers, transferred to her as part of her marriage settlement, 20 acres of prime timber forest adjacent to Black Ridge land, worth at least $15,000 if sold to the right buyer. Her hands shook as she read the deed over and over, making sure she understood correctly. This wasn't estate property. It was hers, completely separate from Rowan's holdings, which meant she could sell it without his permission. She could save everything. The only question was whether she should. She didn't tell Rowan, not right away. First, she needed to know if the plan would even work. She rode into the nearest town, a full day's journey, and met with the land agent who'd handled her father's affairs. He took one look at the deed and whistled. "That's good timber. Old growth. I could have this sold within a week." "How much?" 16, maybe 17,000. More if we wait for the right buyer, but I need it sold immediately." His eyebrows rose. "That desperate?" "Yes." "Does your husband know?" The question made her pause. Because no, Rowan didn't know. And when he found out, he'd be furious. Would see it as interference, as pity, as proof that he'd failed so completely he needed his wife to rescue him. But what choice did she have? Let the estate collapse? Let families starve? Let Rowan drown in pride while everything he'd worked for slipped away? "It's my land," she said firmly. "I don't need his permission." "Legally, no, but just sell it quickly and quietly." The agent nodded slowly. "I'll have papers drawn up by tomorrow." She rode back to Blackridge Hall in the dark, her decision made but her stomach churning with doubt. This would either save them or destroy whatever fragile thing existed between her and Rowan, possibly both. She found him in the study. Where else? Still surrounded by unsolvable equations. "I have a solution," she said without preamble. He looked up, wary. "What kind of solution?" "The kind that doesn't involve selling to Marcus Webb." "Eliza, just listen." She pulled out the deed. "This is mine. 20 acres of timber forest. Worth enough to fund the mine repairs, pay for medical treatment, and cover wages during the shutdown." Rowan stared at the paper like it might bite him. "Where did this come from?" "My father. Part of my settlement. I can sell it." "No." "It's not your decision." "No." He stood, his face going hard. "I won't take your inheritance." "It's not taking. It's using resources we have. It's your security, your future. If this marriage fails, if I fail, then I'll deal with that when it happens. Right now, people are hurt and scared and about to make choices they'll regret. We can stop that." "We?" His voice dripped with bitter irony. "There is no we, Eliza. There's you trying to fix my mistakes and me being too weak to stop you." "That's not what this is, isn't it? You've been cleaning up after me since you arrived. The garden, the tenants, now this. When does it end? When do you finally admit you married a failure?" The words hung between them like poison. Eliza felt something crack inside her chest. Not heartbreak exactly, but close. "You're right," she said quietly. "I have been cleaning up, fixing things, trying to make this work, but not because you're a failure, because I'm tired of watching you drown when there's a rope right in front of you. I don't want your rope." "Fine, then drown. Let Webb take over. Let the tenants leave. Let this whole place collapse because you're too proud to accept help." Her voice shook with fury. "But don't pretend it's about protecting me. This is about you being too scared to let anyone see you need something. That's not—" "Yes, it is. You'd rather fail alone than succeed together. You'd rather lose everything than admit you can't do this by yourself." She threw the deed on his desk. "So here, take it or don't. Either way, I'm done apologizing for trying to help." She left him standing there staring at the deed like it was a live grenade. That night, she packed a bag. Not much. Just enough for a few days. She wasn't running away. Not exactly. But she needed space. Needed to breathe air that wasn't thick with Rowan's misery and her own futile hoping. She'd go to town, stay at the inn, give him time to make his decision without her hovering like a well-meaning curse. She made it as far as the stables before Ruth found her. Ma'am, you need to come quick. What happened? It's Lord Blackridge. Something's wrong. Eliza dropped her bag and ran. She found him in his study, collapsed in his chair, his breathing shallow and his skin gray. The deed lay where she'd thrown it, but his hands were empty. Rowan, she shook him. Rowan, look at me. His eyes opened, unfocused. Eliza? What happened? Are you hurt? Just tired. His voice was barely a whisper. So tired. Mrs. Greer appeared in the doorway. I've sent for the doctor. How long has he been like this? I don't know. I found him an hour ago, but the housekeeper's usual composure cracked. He hasn't been eating, barely sleeping. I tried to tell him, but he wouldn't listen. Eliza pressed her hand to his forehead. Hot, too hot. Help me get him to bed. Between them, they half-carried, half-dragged Rowan to his room. He fought them weakly, muttering about work and ledgers and promises he had to keep. The work can wait, Eliza said firmly. You can't. Can't stop. If you stop, you'll recover. If you don't, you'll die. That seemed to get through. He stopped struggling, let them ease him onto the bed. The doctor arrived just before midnight, an elderly man who smelled like tobacco and looked perpetually exhausted. Fever, he announced after a brief examination, brought on by exhaustion and stress, possibly an infection from some minor injury he ignored. He pulled out a vial of medicine. He needs rest. Real rest, not working from bed, and fluids, and food, though he'll fight you on that. How long? Eliza asked. Until the fever breaks? Could be days, could be weeks. The doctor packed his bag. But if he doesn't rest, if he tries to keep working, he shook his head. I've seen men kill themselves this way, working until there's nothing left. After he left, Eliza pulled a chair beside Rowan's bed and settled in. Mrs. Greer appeared with blankets. You should sleep in your own room, ma'am. No. He wouldn't want you to sleep. I don't care what he wants. He's sick because he's been trying to do everything alone. I'm not leaving him alone now. The housekeeper studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll bring more water. The night stretched long and dark. Rowan tossed restlessly, muttering fragments that made no sense. Names Eliza didn't recognize. Numbers. Apologies to people long dead. Around 3 a.m, he opened his eyes, briefly lucid. You're still here. Where else would I be? London, with Marcus, somewhere better. There is nowhere better, not without you. He laughed weakly. Liar. I'm serious. You're insane. His hand found hers, gripping tight. I've given you nothing. Why do you stay? Because I love you, she thought. The realization hit like lightning, sudden and illuminating and terrifying. She loved him, this broken, difficult, impossible man. Loved him despite everything. Because of everything. Because you're worth it, she said instead. His eyes filled with something that might have been tears. I'm not. Let me decide that. He fell back asleep, still holding her hand. The fever worsened. For 3 days, Rowan burned. The doctor came and went, leaving medicine and grim predictions. Ruth helped with the nursing. Even Mrs. Greer softened, bringing special broths and cool cloths. But it was Eliza who stayed, who bathed his face when the fever spiked, who forced water between his lips, who sat through the nightmares and the delirium and the moments when he was lucid enough to be ashamed of his weakness. You don't have to do this, he said during one of those moments. I know. I haven't earned this. It's not about earning, it's about being here. On the 4th night, his fever broke. Eliza was dozing in the chair when she felt him stir. His eyes opened, clear for the first time in days. Eliza. She jerked awake. How do you feel? Like I got trampled by every horse in the stable. He struggled to sit up. How long? 4 days. 4. He looked around wildly. The mine. The tenants. You need to stay in bed. I can't. There's too much. She pushed him back down with surprising force. There is nothing that can't wait until you can stand without falling over. You don't understand? I understand perfectly. You tried to do everything alone and nearly killed yourself. Now you're going to rest whether you like it or not. They stared at each other, a battle of wills conducted in silence. Finally, Rowan slumped back against the pillows. What happened while I was... The deed sold. 16,000. Enough for everything. His face went carefully blank. You sold it. Yes. Without asking. Yes. Eliza, save it. I know you're angry. I don't care. You were dying, Rowan. The estate was failing. People were suffering. I did what needed to be done. It was yours. It was timber. Just trees and dirt and potential. Now it's medical care for Thomas Marsh, new supports for the mine, wages so families can eat while repairs happen. I traded one thing for another, that's all. That's all? He laughed, the sound harsh. You gave up your security. I gave up trees. I'm keeping something better. What? You, she wanted to say. Us. The possibility that this broken thing between us might still grow into something real. Instead, she said, hope. He looked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Hope. Yes. Hope that what? That they'll stop hating me? That Webb will give up? That I'll magically become the man you deserve? Hope that you'll stop trying to do this alone. That you'll let me help. That maybe... She stopped, her courage failing. Maybe what? Maybe this marriage could be more than a contract. The words hung between them like a held breath. Rowan's expression shifted through a dozen emotions too fast to name. Eliza, his voice cracked. I don't know how to... A knock interrupted. Mrs. Greer, looking shaken. Ma'am, there are men outside. You should come. Eliza exchanged a glance with Rowan, then hurried downstairs. The front hall was full of tenants. Not angry this time. Quiet. Almost reverent. James Hewitt stepped forward. Lady Blackridge, we heard what you did, selling your land. It was necessary. It was more than that. He looked around at the assembled crowd. We've been talking about Lord Blackridge, about Webb's offer, about everything. And? We were wrong. Not about the mine being dangerous. That was real. But about thinking Webb cared more than your husband does. Hewitt's voice roughened. A man works himself sick trying to keep us fed. That's not cruelty. That's something else. Sarah Marsh stepped forward. My Thomas got a letter from a city doctor saying he's been paid for everything, surgery, recovery, all of it, paid in full. Her eyes filled with tears. By you. By the estate, Eliza corrected. By you, Sarah insisted. You didn't have to do that. You could have let us all leave, go to Webb, make your life easier. But you didn't. You fought for us instead. The crowd murmured agreement. Eliza felt something swell in her chest. Not pride exactly, but something close. What about Webb's offer? She asked. We're staying, Hewitt said firmly. All of us. Let him buy somewhere else. Blackridge is our home. Eliza had to grip the banister to stay upright. Thank you. Don't thank us yet. There's something else. Hewitt glanced at the others. We've been pooling resources. Everyone's contributing what they can. Labor, materials, expertise. We're going to help rebuild the mine. Properly. Together. You don't have to... Yes, we do. Because that's what community means. Not just taking when times are good, but giving when they're hard. He extended his hand. If you'll have us. Eliza took it, her throat tight. Of course. Of course we'll have you. They stayed for another hour, discussing plans and timelines and who would do what. By the time they left, Eliza felt lighter than she had in months. She practically ran back upstairs. Rowan was out of bed. Of course he was, standing by the window in his nightshirt, leaning heavily on the frame. You heard, she said. Most of it. He turned and his face was wet. They're staying. They're staying. Because of you. Because of us. She crossed to him. Because we fought for them. together. He stared at her like she was something miraculous, something impossible. His hand rose, hovering near her face. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not. I haven't, I know. I want to try." The words came out broken, desperate. "I want to give you." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I'm afraid." "Of what?" "Of failing. Of hurting you. Of being my father." Eliza took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You are not your father. You're a man who works himself sick trying to care for people, who pushes everyone away because you're terrified of losing them, who married a stranger and gave her the freedom to leave but hoped she'd stay." "Did you? Hope I'd stay?" "Every single day." His control finally shattered. He pulled her close, burying his face in her shoulder, his whole body shaking with sobs he'd probably been holding back for years. Eliza held him, just held him, while he broke apart and started putting himself back together, while the fortress walls he'd built around his heart finally began to crack. Outside, thunder rumbled again, another storm coming, but this time Eliza wasn't afraid. This time, they'd weather it together. She felt it before she saw it, the wrongness in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. They were still standing at the window, Rowan's arms around her, when the first scream split the night. Eliza pulled away. "What?" "Fire. Orange and hungry, rising from the direction of the valley." "No!" Rowan grabbed her arm. "No, that's the marsh cottage. That's—" He was already moving, grabbing clothes, shouting for help. Eliza ran after him, her heart hammering. By the time they reached the valley, half the cottage was engulfed. Sarah Marsh stood in the yard screaming for Thomas, who was still inside. Rowan didn't hesitate. He ran straight into the burning building. "Rowan!" Eliza screamed. "Rowan, no!" But he was already gone, swallowed by smoke and flames. The seconds stretched into hours. The tenants arrived with buckets, forming a chain to the well, but the fire was too big, too fast. Then Rowan emerged, Thomas in his arms, both of them coughing and scorched. Eliza ran to him. "Are you insane? You could have died." "Couldn't let him burn." Rowan's voice was hoarse from smoke. "Couldn't." He collapsed. Not from burns, not from smoke inhalation, from pure exhaustion, his body finally giving out after days of fever and one too many impossible demands. The doctor was summoned again. The cottage burned to ash, and through it all, Eliza knelt beside Rowan's unconscious form, holding his burned hands, and prayed to anyone who might listen. "Not like this. Don't let it end like this." He opened his eyes as dawn broke, gray and cold. "Thomas," he rasped, "alive. Thanks to you." "Good. That's good." His eyes closed again. "Eliza? I'm here. I love you." The words were barely a whisper. Should have said it sooner. Might not get another chance. Her heart stopped. Don't you dare say things like that. Need you to know in case, there is no in case, you're going to be fine, you're going to heal, and then you're going to say those words again when you're not half dead. She gripped his hand tighter. "Do you hear me? You're going to live." He managed a weak smile. "Bossy, you have no idea." His breathing evened out. The doctor checked him over and pronounced him stable, barely. "He needs rest. Real rest this time. No heroics, no emergencies, no saving people from burning buildings." "I'll tie him to the bed if I have to," Eliza said. She meant it. But as she sat beside him, watching his chest rise and fall, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The fire had been too convenient, too perfectly timed, and Marcus Webb had been conspicuously absent since the tenants had rejected his offer. She looked down at Rowan's burned hands, at his soot-stained face, at the man who'd finally told her he loved her while barely conscious. And she made a decision. If someone was trying to destroy them, she'd find out who, and she'd make them pay. The fire investigation started at first light. Eliza left Ruth watching over Rowan and headed to what remained of the Marsh cottage. The structure was gone, just blackened timber and ash, but she wasn't looking at the ruins. She was looking at the ground around them. James Hewitt found her there, crouched in the mud, studying something. "Lady Blackridge." You should be with Lord Blackridge. He's sleeping, and I need to see this. She pointed to marks in the dirt, boot prints, too large to be Sarah's, leading away from the cottage toward the tree line. Someone was here, before the fire started. Hewitt knelt beside her, his expression darkening. Could have been anyone. Tenants pass through here all the time. At midnight? In the rain? She followed the tracks with her eyes. And look, they're deep. Whoever made these was carrying something heavy. What are you saying? I'm saying this wasn't an accident. The words hung in the damp morning air. Hewitt's face went through several emotions: disbelief, anger, then cold calculation. You think someone set this deliberately? I think it's convenient. The tenants decide to stay, reject Webb's offer, and suddenly a cottage burns with an injured boy inside? Eliza stood, brushing dirt from her skirts. If Rowan hadn't pulled Thomas out, if the boy had died, we'd all be terrified, vulnerable, ready to accept any offer that promised safety. Exactly. Hewitt studied the boot prints. We need proof. Then we find it. They spent the next 3 hours tracking. The prints led into the forest, then to a clearing where someone had clearly waited, cigarette butts, disturbed ground. From there, the trail split. One set of prints headed back toward the main road. The other went deeper into the woods. Eliza chose the woods. She found it 20 minutes later, a half-empty can of lamp oil, discarded in the underbrush, the kind used for lanterns, the kind that would make a fire spread fast and hot. Got you, she whispered. But having evidence and proving who was responsible were different things. She couldn't just accuse Marcus Webb without more, couldn't risk making accusations she couldn't back up. She needed him to reveal himself. By the time she returned to Blackridge Hall, a plan was forming. Dangerous, possibly stupid, but the only one she had. She found Mrs. Greer in the kitchen. I need to send a message to Marcus Webb. The housekeeper's expression went cold. Why would you do that? Because I'm going to set a trap, and I need bait. Mrs. Greer listened to her plan with growing alarm. This is madness. If Lord Blackridge knew, he can't know, not yet. He's too weak, and he'd try to stop me. As he should. What you're proposing is necessary. Eliza met her eyes. Someone tried to kill Thomas Marsh to scare people back into Webb's hands. I'm going to prove it, but I need your help. For a long moment, Mrs. Greer just stared at her. Then, slowly, she nodded. What do you need me to do? The message went out that afternoon. Lord Blackridge gravely ill, estate decisions being handled by Lady Blackridge. Would appreciate Mr. Webb's counsel on urgent matters. Marcus arrived the next morning, all false concern and calculating eyes. Eliza, I came as soon as I received your note. How is Rowan? Barely conscious, the smoke damage was worse than the doctor initially thought. The lies came easier than they should have. I'm handling estate business until he recovers. If he recovers. She let the comment pass, though it made her skin crawl. That's why I asked you here. I need advice about the mine repairs. The costs are higher than anticipated, and I'm overwhelmed. Marcus's expression shifted to something that might have been sympathy if it weren't for the triumph lurking beneath. Of course. I'd be happy to help. Perhaps we could review the contracts. I'd appreciate that. She led him to Rowan's study, the inner sanctum he'd never allowed Marcus into before. Let him see the ledgers, the maps, the careful documentation of every penny. Let him think she was weak, desperate, ready to crack. The numbers are worse than I thought, Marcus said after an hour of review. Even with the timber sale, you're barely breaking even, and if Rowan doesn't recover, he'll recover. But if he doesn't, you'll need a partner, someone who can handle the operational side while I what? Play lady of the manor? She let bitterness creep into her voice. I know what people think, that I'm in over my head, that I should just sell and move back to civilization. Is that so terrible? You've done your duty, Eliza, more than anyone could ask. But this place, it breaks people. You've seen what it did to Rowan. Rowan broke himself. Did he? Or did the impossible expectations of this estate grind him down until there was nothing left? Marcus leaned forward. You don't have to follow him into that darkness. Let me help. A partnership. 60-40 in your favor. You keep the house, I handle the business. Everyone wins. Except Rowan. Rowan made his choices. Now you get to make yours. She pretended to consider it. Let the silence stretch. Let him think he was winning. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course. But don't take too long. Winter's coming, and decisions delayed become crises. He left looking satisfied, like a cat that had finally cornered the mouse. Eliza waited until his carriage disappeared down the drive, then went to find James Hewitt. Did you get it? He held up a boot. Found it in his carriage, matches the prints exactly. And the oil can? Sent it to the magistrate with a detailed report, along with witness statements from 3 people who saw Webb's man near the Marsh cottage that night. His man? That fancy valet of his, the one with the scar. Hewitt's expression was grim. Turns out he's not a valet at all. He's an enforcer. Has a reputation in the city for handling Webb's dirty work. Eliza felt cold settle in her stomach. How long until the magistrate acts? Could be days. Could be weeks. Frontier justice moves slow. We don't have weeks. Then what do you propose? She thought about the evidence, about Marcus's careful manipulation, about the way he'd positioned himself as savior while orchestrating disasters. We make him confess. Hewitt stared at her. How? By giving him exactly what he wants. The gathering was set for 3 days later, enough time for word to spread, for people to prepare, for Marcus to believe he'd won. Eliza spent those days at Rowan's bedside, watching him sleep, whispering her plan when he was too fevered to remember it later. She needed to tell someone, even if that someone couldn't hear her properly. You're going to be furious, she murmured on the second night. You're going to wake up and hate what I've done. But I can't watch him destroy everything you've built. Not when I have the power to stop him. Rowan's hand twitched in hers. His eyes opened, fever bright and unfocused. Eliza? I'm here. Don't. He struggled to speak. Don't trust him. I know. Dangerous. He'll hurt you. He'll try. Promise me. His grip tightened with surprising strength. Promise you'll be careful. I promise. She kissed his burned knuckles. Now rest. I need you to get better so you can yell at me properly when this is over. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Then he slipped back into sleep. The morning of the gathering dawned clear and cold, first real hint of autumn in the air. Eliza dressed carefully, choosing one of her simpler gowns. She wanted to look vulnerable, uncertain. She wanted Marcus to underestimate her one last time. The tenants assembled in the main hall by noon. All of them, farmers, miners, merchants, families who'd called Blackridge home for generations. They stood in nervous clusters, whispering, wondering why they'd been summoned. Marcus arrived fashionably late, all charm and perfect manners. Quite a crowd, he observed. What's the occasion? A decision, Eliza said. About the estate's future. His eyes lit up. I see. And have you reached one? I have. She stood at the top of the staircase, looking down at the assembled faces. Some friendly, some wary, all watching to see what she'd do. Thank you all for coming, she began. I know the past weeks have been difficult. The mine accident, Lord Blackridge's illness, the fire at the Marsh cottage. Tragic, all of it, Marcus interjected smoothly. But these things happen on the frontier, which is why I've been advocating for better safety measures, better resources. Better control? Eliza's voice cut through his. That's what you really want, isn't it, Marcus? Not partnership, control. The room went silent. Marcus's smile froze. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm implying that the fire at the Marsh cottage wasn't an accident, that someone set it deliberately to frighten people, to make them desperate enough to accept any offer of security. That's a serious accusation. Yes, it is. She descended the stairs slowly. So let me make it clearer. Your man, the one you call a valet, was seen near the cottage that night. Boot prints matching his were found at the scene, along with a can of lamp oil identical to the ones you use in your carriage. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Circumstantial at best. Perhaps. Except your man also has a reputation. In the city. for handling problems, for making inconvenient obstacles disappear. You've been listening to gossip. I've been investigating. She pulled out a letter. This is from the magistrate, confirming that your employee has been questioned and that he's been very cooperative. That landed. Marcus's smile vanished completely. He's lying. Whatever he told you, he told the magistrate everything, how you paid him to set the fire, how you planned to blame it on faulty equipment, how you intended to use the fear to pressure people into selling. Eliza's voice stayed level. You tried to kill a crippled boy to make a profit, Marcus. I did no such thing. His composure was cracking. You have no proof. I have a confession. I have witnesses. I have evidence. She looked at the crowd. And I have people who are tired of being manipulated. Sarah Marsh stepped forward, her face hard. You tried to burn my son alive. I saved the estate. I offered security, stability. You offered lies. James Hewitt joined Sarah. You wanted control of the mine, of the timber, of everything. And you didn't care who got hurt along the way. More tenants stepped forward. A wall of angry, determined people who'd finally seen through the charm. Marcus looked around wildly. This is absurd. Eliza, you can't possibly believe. I believe you're a coward who hides behind money and hired thugs. I believe you saw vulnerable people and thought they'd be easy prey. I believe you underestimated every single person in this room. She stopped directly in front of him, including me. For a moment, she thought he might lunge at her. His hands clenched, his face flushed with rage. Then he laughed, bitter and sharp. You think this matters? You think one confession from a hired hand is enough? I have lawyers, Eliza. I have connections. I'll tie this up in courts for years. Maybe, but you'll do it from somewhere else. She gestured to the door. You're not welcome here anymore. You can't banish me. You own nothing here. Every leaseholder has revoked your offers. Every contract you tried to negotiate is void. And the magistrate has issued a warrant for your arrest on charges of arson and attempted murder. As if summoned, the magistrate himself appeared at the door with 2 deputies. Mr. Webb, you need to come with us. Marcus stared at her with pure hatred. This isn't over. Yes, Eliza said quietly. It is. They led him away in chains. The room erupted in noise, people talking, crying, some cheering. Eliza stood in the middle of it all, shaking with adrenaline and relief. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Eliza. The voice was rough, barely audible over the crowd, but she'd know it anywhere. She turned to find Rowan standing in the doorway, leaning heavily on the frame. He was pale, his bandaged hands clutching the wood for support, but he was standing. You're supposed to be in bed, she said. Heard shouting. Thought. He swayed, and she rushed to steady him. What did you do? What you couldn't, because you were too sick and too stubborn. She glared at him. And don't you dare lecture me. You ran into a burning building. I just set a trap. You confronted a man who tried to commit murder. While surrounded by 40 witnesses and the magistrate, I was perfectly safe. You could have been killed. So could you. Multiple times. At least I planned ahead. They stared at each other, both too exhausted for real anger. Then Rowan started laughing, weak, breathless, but genuine. You're impossible. You're one to talk. He reached for her face with his bandaged hand, then stopped. I can't. My hands. She caught his wrist gently, pressed a kiss to his palm through the bandages. When you're better, when you're healed, we'll figure out everything then. I meant what I said, in the valley. His voice dropped. I love you. I know. You told me while delirious with fever and smoke inhalation. I'm telling you now, conscious, sober, completely serious. He swayed again, and she tightened her grip. I love you, Eliza. I have for months. I was just too scared, broken, convinced you'd ruin everything you touched. She smiled. I know, but you're working on it. I want to be better, for you, for them. He gestured weakly at the crowd. For yourself, she finished. You have to want it for yourself first. He nodded slowly. Will you help me? Every single day. Even when you don't want it, Even when you fight me. Even when... He kissed her. Awkward and off-center and completely perfect, because his hands were bandaged and he was half dead with exhaustion, and neither of them cared. The crowd erupted in cheers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rowan was grinning like a fool. I should have done that months ago. Yes, you should have. I'm an idiot. Yes, you are. She kissed him again, softer. But you're my idiot. Mrs. Greer appeared with a wheelchair, actually produced a wheelchair from somewhere, and gave them both a stern look. Lord Blackridge, you're going back to bed before you collapse in front of everyone. I'm fine. You're barely standing. Bed. Now. He looked at Eliza for support. She just shrugged. Don't look at me. I agree with her. Traitor. Realist. They got him settled over his protests, and the crowd gradually dispersed. But the atmosphere had changed. People lingered, talking not with fear or anger, but with something that looked like hope. James Hewitt approached as Eliza was seeing the last visitors out. Lady Blackridge, a word? Of course. What you did today, he paused, choosing his words carefully. It took courage and smarts. We owe you a debt. You owe me nothing. This is my home too. Is it? You could leave any time. Go back to wherever you came from. Have an easier life. Could I? She looked back at the hall, at the garden visible through the windows, at the stairs Rowan had just been carried up. I don't think I could anymore. This place, these people, they're mine now, for better or worse. Hewitt smiled. Then welcome home, Lady Blackridge. It was the first time anyone had said it like they meant it. That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, Eliza sat by Rowan's bed and told him everything. Every detail of the investigation, the trap, the confrontation. He listened with a mixture of pride and horror. You could have been hurt, but I wasn't. He could have, but he didn't. She took his hand carefully. Stop thinking about what could have happened and focus on what did. We won. Webb's gone. The estate is safe. And for the first time since I arrived, people actually want to be here. Because of you. Because of us. She squeezed his fingers gently. You built something worth saving, Rowan. I just reminded people of that. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, marry me. We're already married. No, I mean, he struggled to sit up. I mean, really marry me. Not a contract, not an arrangement, a real marriage. Choice, not duty. Rowan, I know I don't deserve it. I know I've been... He stopped, his voice breaking. But I want to try. I want to be the husband you deserve. The man you believed I could be even when I didn't believe it myself. Eliza felt tears burn her eyes. You're already that man. You just needed to see it. So is that a yes? It's an I already said yes 6 months ago, but... She kissed him softly. I'll say it again when you're better. When we can do it properly. With witnesses who aren't wondering if you're delirious. He laughed, then winced. Everything hurts. That's what happens when you run into burning buildings. Worth it. For saving Thomas? Yes. For scaring me half to death? No. Sorry. No, you're not. No, I'm not. He pulled her closer, carefully, mindful of his burns. But I am grateful. For you, for this. For getting a second chance I definitely didn't earn. Third chance, at least. Don't push it. They stayed like that until he fell asleep, his breathing steady and peaceful for the first time in weeks. Eliza sat in the chair beside his bed, watching firelight play across his face, and let herself finally believe it. They'd survived. The estate had survived. And somehow, impossibly, they'd found something worth more than safety or security or survival. They'd found each other. The next morning brought rain, soft and steady, washing away the last ash from the fire, soaking into the garden's thirsty soil. Eliza stood at the window watching it fall, feeling the change in the air. Autumn was coming. Then winter. Hard months ahead, no question, but they'd face them together. A knock at the door, Ruth carrying a tray of breakfast. For Lord Blackridge, though I suspect he'll insist on joining you in the dining room. Let him try. I'll drag him back to bed if necessary. Ruth smiled. You're good for him, ma'am. You make him want to live instead of just survive. After she left, Eliza brought the tray to Rowan's room. He was already awake, trying to button his shirt one-handed. Here. She set down the tray and helped. You're impossible. You've mentioned that. I'll keep mentioning it until it sinks in. Fair enough. He caught her hand as she finished the last button. Eliza, about what I said last night. You meant it. I know. I want to do this right. Court you properly. Show you. Rowan. She cupped his face. I don't need courting. I need partnership. I need honesty. I need you to stop trying to be perfect and just be present. I can do that? Can you? I can try, with help. Then that's enough. They ate breakfast together, really together, not him working while she watched. They talked about repairs needed, about harvest planning, about the tenants who'd stayed and the community they were building. They talked like partners, like equals, like people who'd chosen each other instead of just being thrown together by circumstance. And when Rowan reached across the table to take her hand, bandaged and clumsy but reaching anyway, Eliza held on tight and didn't let go. Outside, the rain continued. The garden grew, the estate breathed, and for the first time since she'd arrived at Blackridge Hall, Eliza felt like she'd come home. Not because the place had changed, but because she had. And so had the man sitting across from her, smiling like he'd finally figured out something he'd been missing all along. How to let someone in. How to accept help. How to love. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about frontier life ever was. But it was real. Hard-won. Worth fighting for. And that, Eliza thought, watching Rowan attempt to butter bread with bandaged hands and refuse her help out of pure stubbornness, was more than enough. 3 weeks later, Rowan's hands had healed enough to hold a pen without wincing. The first thing he did was rewrite every ledger entry Eliza had made in his absence. Not because they were wrong, they weren't, but because he needed to see the numbers himself. Needed to understand what had happened while he'd been unconscious. You sold timber futures I didn't know we had, he said one morning, squinting at her handwriting. Your father's contracts, hidden in the back of the filing cabinet. Eliza didn't look up from the letter she was writing. Generated another $2,000, enough to finish the mine repairs ahead of schedule. And you negotiated a bulk rate with the lumber mill? They were overcharging. I pointed it out. They adjusted. By 15%. They were being greedy. She signed her name with a flourish. I wasn't. Rowan sat back, shaking his head. You've been managing this estate better in 3 weeks than I did in 3 years. That's not true. I just had the advantage of not being half dead with exhaustion. She finally looked at him. And I asked for help. Novel concept. He couldn't argue with that. The mine reopened on the 1st of October, fully inspected, newly reinforced, with safety measures that actually made sense. Rowan insisted on being there for the opening, despite the fact that he still moved like an old man, and his hands were covered in healing scars. The miners gathered at the entrance, nervous and hopeful. James Hewitt stepped forward as their spokesman. Lord Blackridge, before we go in, we wanted to say something. Rowan tensed. Eliza, standing beside him, squeezed his arm gently. We know these past months haven't been easy, Hewitt continued, for any of us. And we know we didn't make it easier, doubting you the way we did. You had reason to doubt. Maybe, but we also had reason to trust. You nearly died pulling Thomas Marsh out of that fire. Your wife, he glanced at Eliza, your wife risked everything to protect us from Webb. You both fought for this place when it would have been easier to walk away. Sarah Marsh stepped forward, Thomas leaning on crutches beside her. The boy's leg was still healing, but he was walking, actually walking. We wanted to thank you, Sarah said, both of you, for not giving up on us. Thomas held out something wrapped in cloth. Made this for you, ma'am. In the city, while I was recovering. Eliza unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a carved wooden box, simple but beautifully made, with a rose etched into the lid. For your garden seeds, Thomas said shyly, so you can keep planting. Her throat went tight. It's perfect. Thank you. And for Lord Blackridge, Hewitt produced a hammer, its handle worn smooth with use. This was my father's, and his father's before that. Been in my family 3 generations. I want you to have it. Rowan stared at the tool like it might bite him. I can't accept this. You can, because you earned it. Hewitt pressed it into his hands. A good hammer doesn't fail. It just keeps working, day after day, until the job's done. That's you, sir. That's what you've been for us. For a moment, Eliza thought Rowan might actually cry. His jaw worked, his eyes too bright. His voice cracked. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep the mine safe. Say you'll keep trying. That's all we need. Rowan nodded, gripping the hammer like a lifeline. I will. I promise. The miners cheered, a sound that echoed off the mountainside and sent birds scattering from the trees. Then they filed into the mine, back to work, back to normal. Eliza and Rowan stood together in the autumn sunlight, watching them go. That went better than expected, she said quietly. You orchestrated it, didn't you? I may have suggested that a gesture of goodwill would help. Manipulative. Practical. She leaned into his shoulder. Besides, you deserved it, even if you don't believe that yet. He wrapped an arm around her, still careful of his healing hands, but getting better at the simple act of touching her. I'm working on it. I know. They walked back to the house slowly, neither in a hurry. The garden was preparing for winter, some beds already cleared, others yielding last harvests of squash and root vegetables. Ruth and 2 tenant women were working the rows, laughing about something. It's different now, Rowan said, stopping to watch. The whole estate feels lighter. That's what happens when people aren't terrified of their landlord. I was never... He stopped, reconsidering. Was I really that bad? You were that isolated. There's a difference. Eliza picked a late tomato, still warm from the sun. But you're changing. We both are. Is it enough? Enough for what? For you to be happy here. She looked at him, really looked. At the man who'd been a stranger 6 months ago, who'd kept her at arm's length for so long she'd nearly given up, who was now asking, genuinely asking, if she was happy. Ask me again in a year, she said, when we've survived our first winter together. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. She bit into the tomato, juice running down her chin. But I'm not leaving, if that's what you're worried about. You're stuck with me. Relief washed over his face, so obvious it made her heart ache. Good, he said, because I have plans. What kind of plans? You'll see. The first plan revealed itself 2 days later when Rowan announced they were hosting a harvest dinner. A what? Eliza stared at him like he'd suggested burning down the house. A dinner. For the tenants, to celebrate the harvest and everything else. He looked uncertain, like he was trying out a new language. It's traditional. My mother used to do it every year. Your mother was social. You hide in your study. I'm trying to be better, remember? Better doesn't mean traumatizing yourself with forced socializing. Maybe I need the trauma. He caught her hand. Will you help me? I have no idea how to do this. So Eliza found herself planning a party, something she'd never expected to do at Blackridge Hall. Mrs. Greer was surprisingly enthusiastic, producing recipes from the old Lady Blackridge's personal collection. Ruth recruited tenant women to help with cooking. Even the stable master offered to roast a pig. This is insane, Eliza muttered, reviewing seating arrangements. We're feeding 60 people. 73, actually, Rowan corrected from his desk. The Marsh family is bringing cousins. Where are we putting 73 people? The old ballroom, western wing. He didn't look up from his work. Haven't used it since my mother died, but it's still there. Eliza had never been in the western wing. It had always been closed, off limits. But when she ventured there with Ruth and Mrs. Greer, she found a space that took her breath away. The ballroom was huge, easily large enough for 100 people. Tall windows overlooked the valley. The floor was dusty, but intact. And the ceiling, oh, she breathed. The ceiling was painted with stars. Constellations she recognized and some she didn't, all rendered in silver and gold that still caught the light. The old lord, Rowan's grandfather, had it done for his wife, Mrs. Greer said quietly. She loved astronomy, used to host dances here, where they'd dim the lamps and dance under the stars. Why did it close? After she died, the old lord closed it. Then, after Rowan's mother died, he closed it again. Grief has a way of locking doors in this house. Eliza looked around at the dusty beauty, the forgotten grandeur. Then it's time to open them. They spent 3 days cleaning, scrubbing floors, washing windows, polishing the old chandelier until it gleamed. Rowan didn't help. His hands were still too damaged for heavy work, but he watched from the doorway sometimes, his expression unreadable. "What are you thinking?" Eliza asked, finding him there on the 3rd day. "That I should have done this years ago. You weren't ready. Neither is the house. Look at it. It's falling apart. It's healing, like you." She stood beside him. "Besides, falling apart just means there's room to rebuild." The night of the harvest dinner, Eliza dressed in her nicest gown, deep green velvet that had been part of her trousseau. Ruth helped with her hair, twisting it up and leaving a few curls loose. "You look beautiful, ma'am." "I look terrified." "That too." She found Rowan waiting at the bottom of the stairs, also dressed formally. He'd gotten new clothes, finally, and the dark coat made him look less like a haunted groundskeeper and more like the lord he actually was. "You clean up well," she said. "I could say the same." He offered his arm, the gesture still slightly awkward, but genuine. "Ready?" "Not even slightly." "Me neither. Let's do it anyway." The tenants arrived in clusters, awed and nervous. Many had never been inside the main house before. Certainly never the ballroom. Their reactions when they saw the starlit ceiling were worth every hour of cleaning. "It's beautiful," Sarah Marsh whispered. "It's home," Rowan said, surprising everyone, including himself. "Our home. All of us." The dinner was chaos, good chaos, but still. 73 people eating, talking, laughing, children running between tables. The stable master's roasted pig was a triumph. Mrs. Greer's bread disappeared within minutes. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Eliza looked around and realized something. This was working. The community Rowan had tried so hard to manage from a distance was forming right here, around shared food and shared space. People were talking to him, actually talking, not just reporting problems. He was listening, actually listening, not just calculating solutions. He was learning to be part of something instead of apart from it. Around 9, someone produced a fiddle. Then someone else had a guitar. Before Eliza quite understood how it happened, there was music and dancing. "No," Rowan said immediately when she looked at him. "Absolutely not." "Come on, your hands are healed enough." "I don't dance." "You're the host. You have to dance." "I'll embarrass us both." "I'll risk it." She pulled him onto the floor despite his protests. He was terrible, stiff and awkward, and counting steps under his breath. But he was trying, and when she laughed at his concentration face, he actually smiled. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "This is wonderful. I'm going to step on your feet." "You already did, twice. I forgive you." They spun through the waltz, if their stumbling could be called spinning, while the painted stars watched overhead. Other couples joined them. The music swelled, and for the first time since she'd arrived at Blackridge Hall, Eliza felt the house breathe with life instead of loneliness. Later, after most people had gone home and the few remaining guests were finishing the last of the wine, Rowan pulled her aside. "There's something I need to show you." He led her upstairs to a room she'd never seen, smaller than his study, with a single window overlooking the garden. Inside was a desk, bookshelves, a comfortable chair, and on the desk, a stack of blank ledgers. "What is this?" "Your office, if you want it." He looked nervous. "I was thinking, you've been managing half the estate business anyway. You should have a proper space. Make it official." Eliza walked slowly around the room, touching the desk, the shelves. "Official how?" "However you want. Partner, co-manager, estate administrator. I don't care about the title, He took a breath. "I can't do this alone anymore. I don't want to do it alone. And you're better at the people part than I'll ever be." "The people part?" "Talking to them, understanding them, making them feel like they matter. His voice went quiet. Making me feel like I matter. She crossed to him, taking his scarred hands in hers. You've always mattered. You just didn't believe it. I'm starting to. He squeezed her fingers gently. Because of you. Not just me. Them too. All of them. She gestured toward the window, toward the valley beyond. We did this together. So is that a yes? To the office? It's a yes to partnership. To building something real instead of just surviving. She kissed him softly. To us. The winter that followed was hard. They all were on the frontier, but it was different this time. When snow blocked the roads, neighbors helped each other dig out. When a family store of food ran short, others shared. When someone got sick, the community rallied. And at the center of it all, Rowan and Eliza worked side by side. Him handling the numbers and logistics, her managing the relationships and needs. They argued sometimes, disagreed often, but they figured it out together. The garden slept under snow, but Eliza planned for spring, drew designs for expanded beds, researched new crops, corresponded with seed suppliers. Thomas Marsh's leg healed slowly but steadily. By midwinter, he was walking without crutches. By spring, he'd started an apprenticeship with the estate carpenter. The mine ran smoothly, no accidents, no injuries, just steady, safe work that paid fair wages. And Blackridge Hall transformed from a fortress into something that almost resembled a home. One night in late February, Eliza woke to find Rowan's side of the bed empty. She found him in his study, their study now, with her desk positioned beside his, staring at the ledgers. Can't sleep? She asked. Looking at numbers. At 2 a.m? They're good numbers. I keep having to check them to believe it. He pulled her into his lap. We're not just breaking even anymore. We're actually profitable. Not by much, but enough. Yeah. He buried his face in her hair. I never thought, when you first arrived, I was so convinced this marriage would be another failure. Another thing I'd ruin. You didn't ruin it. You just took the long way around. The very long way. Was it worth it? He pulled back to look at her, his expression serious. Every single terrible, difficult, beautiful moment. Yes. She kissed him, long and deep and full of everything she couldn't quite put into words. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she noticed something on his desk. A small wooden box. The one Thomas had made for her. What's this doing here? Open it. Inside, nestled in sawdust, was a ring. Simple silver band with a small emerald, the same green as her eyes. Rowan, I know we're already married, but I want to do it right this time. Ask properly. Give you a choice. He slid off the chair, kneeling despite his still healing hands. Eliza Whitmore Blackridge, will you marry me? Not because your father arranged it, not because you felt obligated, but because you want to, because you choose this. Choose us. Her vision blurred with tears. You're asking me to marry you when we're already married? I'm asking you to stay married to me, to choose it every day, to build this life with me even when it's hard. His voice cracked. To love me even though I'm... Stop. She cupped his face. I already choose you. Every impossible, stubborn, beautiful part of you. Every single day. Is that a yes? It's a yes, you ridiculous man. He slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, then pulled her down for a kiss that made her forget about ledgers and responsibilities and everything except the feeling of his arms around her. When they finally made it back to bed, they didn't sleep. Just held each other in the darkness, listening to wind howl outside while staying warm inside. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it was explosive. The garden erupted in growth. Everything Eliza had planned doubled in reality. The beds overflowed with vegetables. The roses she'd finally planted bloomed in impossible profusion. Yellow roses. Like his mother's. Rowan found her there one morning, tears streaming down her face as she stared at the blooms. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. They're perfect. They're just flowers. They're proof that dead things can live again if you give them the right conditions. She turned to him. We're proof of that. He pulled her close, both of them surrounded by roses and new growth and the smell of warming earth. I love you, he said, in case I haven't mentioned it recently. You mentioned it this morning and last night, and I'm making up for lost time. Keep going. I'm not complaining. A year after she'd first arrived at Blackridge Hall, Eliza stood in the ballroom, now regularly used for community gatherings, and looked around at the assembled faces. The tenants who'd once been strangers were now friends. The estate that had been dying was thriving, and the man who'd been a ghost was standing beside her, solid and real, and hers. "Speech," someone called. "Lady Blackridge should say something." "No speeches," Eliza protested. "Just a few words," Sarah Marsh insisted. Eliza looked at Rowan, who just shrugged. "You're better at this than I am," his expression said. She took a breath. "A year ago, I came here terrified. I married a stranger, moved to a place that felt like the end of the world. I didn't know if I'd survive it, much less find a home." The room went quiet. "But I learned something. Home isn't about the place. It's about the people. About fighting for each other even when it's hard. About choosing to stay when leaving would be easier." She found Rowan's hand, squeezed it. "About turning fortresses into homes and strangers into family." "Hear, hear," James Hewitt raised his glass. "To Lady Blackridge, and to all of us who were smart enough to listen to her." The toast rang out, echoing off the painted stars overhead. Later, when everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, Eliza and Rowan walked through the garden together. The summer evening was warm, fireflies just starting to emerge. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd gone to London?" Rowan asked. "If you'd left when Marcus offered?" "Sometimes, but not with regret." "No?" "No, because I didn't come here to escape. I came here to build something." She stopped by the fountain, now repaired and running, water catching the last of the daylight. "And that's what we did. What we're still doing." "Yes." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the garden settle into evening. Somewhere in the valley, a dog barked. Smoke rose from cottage chimneys. Life continued, messy and real and beautiful. "I have news," Eliza said quietly. "Good news or bad news?" "Depends on how you feel about chaos." He turned to her, suddenly alert. "What kind of chaos?" "The small, loud, life-changing kind." She placed his hand on her stomach. "We're going to have a baby." For a moment, he just stared at her, his face cycling through shock, terror, and finally landing on something that looked like wonder. "A baby?" "Yes. You're due in late winter, according to the doctor." "I don't—" His voice broke. "I don't know how to be a father." "You didn't know how to be a husband either. Look how that turned out." He laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. Then he pulled her close, careful and reverent, like she was made of glass. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Me too." "What if I fail? What if I'm like my father? What if—" "Then we'll figure it out. Together, like we've figured out everything else." She pulled back to look at him. "You're not your father, Rowan. You're going to be an amazing dad. Awkward and overprotective and probably too worried, but amazing." "You really believe that?" "I really do." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, of future, of the family they were building in this impossible place. When they finally pulled apart, the stars were coming out overhead, the same stars painted on the ballroom ceiling, the same stars his grandmother had loved, his mother had cherished, and now he and Eliza would show their child. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For staying, for fighting, for seeing something in me worth saving. Thank you for letting me in." Finally, they walked back to the house hand in hand, leaving the garden to its evening rituals. Behind them, roses bloomed in the gathering darkness. Ahead, windows glowed with warm light, and Blackridge Hall, once a prison built from stone and silence, welcomed them home with open doors and the promise of tomorrow. 5 years later, Eliza stood in the same garden, watching her daughter chase fireflies while her son, barely walking, tottered after her on unsteady legs. "Careful," Rowan called, hovering nearby with the anxiety of a man who'd learned to love but never learned to relax about it. "Let them play," Eliza said, pulling him down to sit beside her on the fountain's edge. "They're fine. Emma's going to fall. She falls every day. She gets back up every day. And Michael's too little to be running like that. He's walking, barely. Relax. He tried, failed, kept watching the children with the same intensity he once brought to ledgers. Some things never changed, but so much had. The estate was thriving now, not just surviving, but actually growing. New cottages dotted the valley. The mine had expanded, the timber operation was turning steady profit, and the community that had once been fractured and suspicious was now tight-knit and loyal, all because two broken people had chosen to heal together instead of apart. "Do you ever miss it?" Rowan asked quietly. "Your old life. Before all this." Eliza thought about it honestly, about the comfortable ignorance of her father's house, the certainty of a world where decisions were made for her. "No," she said finally. "That life was easier. But this one is mine. Ours. Yes, ours." Emma ran up, Firefly cupped in her hands. "Mama, look!" "Beautiful, sweetheart. Now let it go so it can find its family." The girl opened her hands reluctantly, watching the insect spiral upward into the darkening sky. Michael toddled over, demanding to be picked up. Rowan scooped him up easily, settling the boy against his chest. "Time for bed," he announced. "No!" Emma protested. "Yes, but I'll tell you the story about the fortress. The one about you and Mama? That's the one." They headed inside, children protesting sleepily, parents smiling at the familiar battle. The house welcomed them, truly welcomed, not just sheltered. Every room held life now, laughter, love. That night, after the children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Eliza found Rowan on the balcony outside their room. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "How lucky I am. How close I came to losing all this because I was too scared to try. But you did try. Eventually. Only because you wouldn't let me give up. That's what partners do." He turned in her arms, looking down at her with an expression that still made her heart skip. Even after 5 years, even after everything, he could still look at her like she was the only thing that mattered. "I love you," he said, "more than I knew it was possible to love anyone." "I know. You tell me every day. Still making up for lost time. Keep going. I'll never get tired of hearing it." He kissed her under the stars, the real ones, not painted. And Eliza thought about how far they'd come. From strangers to enemies to allies to lovers to parents. From fortress to home. From survival to life. The frontier was still harsh. Winter would still be brutal. Challenges would still come. But they'd face them together. And that made all the difference.